It's quite a common strategy amongst people that spread hate and disinformation. They almost need to sow distrust of mainstream media in order to insulate their supporters from reality and feed them a steady diet of their own take on things. And that's what we see Tate doing. Hi, I'm Callum. I'm the head of research at the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, which is a sort of social media watchdog that looks at online harms, including hate and disinformation.
So could you tell me about the research that you recently carried out looking into these fake accounts?
Well, what we did is we took a very simple measure of whether an account is fake or not. And that was if it's got 10 or less followers, and if it was created in the last 3 months. And we looked at people who had tweeted pro-Andrew Tate hashtags, and we identified 4,600 of these fake accounts that were using those hashtags, and it represented 30% of all the tens of thousands of tweets that were posted to those hashtags. And they were pushing narratives about Andrew Tate's arrest in Romania, suggesting that that arrest was part of a conspiracy, that he was in fact innocent, that the establishment was trying to attack him for his views. And based on other research we've done, we suspect that these are real people who are setting up accounts and are part of Tate's network of supporters, which is quite well organised, and they're jumping on Twitter with fake accounts to try and create an impression or illusion of widespread support for him by tweeting out multiple times supportive messages in line with his own accounts and claims of a conspiracy about his arrest.
Talk to me about why this method of posting these tweets, like how does that influence the narrative?
Well, what we've seen with Tate over time, not just on Twitter with this research that we've done, but on TikTok as well, he creates an artificial sort of significance on social media. And that has two effects. First of all, there's this artificial sense that there's lots of people out there who really admire him and support him. Now, of course, he is very well known now, but he started by building a much more artificial sort of significance on social media with lots of accounts that are actually, in many cases, financially tied to him and his get-rich-quick schemes, posting this stuff. And now he's using that same sort of network to get out there and create an artificial sense that there's lots of people supporting him. But because this is social media, that has another effect. Social media algorithms often pick up on these signals that there's lots of people tweeting about the same thing or using the same hashtag, and it gets inserted into people's feeds as recommended content, or it makes that hashtag significant enough to get into trending topics. And it might be some of the stuff that you see then when you go and click on hashtag Andrew Tate. Amongst news of his arrest, you'll get these, at a glance, seemingly authentic messages supporting him, saying that he's innocent, that the victims in this case are not to be believed, and you wouldn't know at a glance that these are fake accounts. So he's really doing what he's done all along, which is gaming social media algorithms to get his messages out there, make money, and build a social media celebrity around himself.
Would you say there's been a real world impact on, like, from these fake accounts and what they're tweeting?
There has been, because we know from reports from schools up and down the country, I've seen some of the letters that they've sent to parents. There's been lots of reporting about concerns amongst teachers that young men in particular are being really influenced by Andrew Tate. They think he's a model of success. They think he's a model of how men should have relationships with women that are based on dominance and dominating women and not giving them any real autonomy. And it's not hard to see when you've got accounts of boys as young as 12, suggesting that sexual abuse isn't really all that bad, that could have a long-lasting effect. If those attitudes really take hold, you've got a generation there that could be holding really regressive views about women. When we've all assumed that the march of progress will go forward, that this generation of young people will probably understand that men and women are equal better than the last did. Instead, you might see things go backwards, and it could even justify things like sexual assault or rape or sex trafficking, which are all things that Andrew Tate stands accused of and in various ways has defended. So I think it's very concerning, and we've got to listen to people who are spending time with young people, like teachers and parents, when they say they're really concerned about this.
Since Tate was arrested, he keeps referring to the Matrix. Could you talk to me about that and what's the significance of that?
Well, the Matrix has this broader currency in sort of many alternative communities online, including misogynist communities, including conspiracy communities. And what it has in common is this idea that we're normal people are plugged into the drudgery of what we think is the real world, in common with the film The Matrix, where it turns out that we're in a simulation. So this has a couple of benefits for the sort of messages that Andrew Tate in particular wants to propel. One of them is it's all linked to his get-rich-quick schemes, in the sense that he's telling young men in particular, if you join my community and in effect take the red pill and escape, you will be able to escape your current reality and join mine, where you'll be very rich and successful. But the other element of this is that the Matrix in the film is designed to keep us occupied and hide the reality from us. So following his arrest, this has really become a core part of his messaging, in that he says he uses the phrase the Matrix to refer to the authorities. And he claims that they are part of a bigger conspiracy by elites to keep him under control and hide him from public view. Of course, the reality is that the authorities are just enforcing the law, and he has broken the law potentially in terms of sex trafficking and sexual assault and abuse.
Do you think that, this conspiratorial factor around his arrest is actually having an impact on his fans?
It's quite a common strategy amongst people that spread hate and disinformation. They almost need to sow distrust of mainstream media in order to insulate their supporters from reality and feed them a steady diet of their own take on things. And that's what we see Tate doing. Unfortunately, I think it is having an effect. If you read some of these accounts, of young men in schools up and down the country, many of them are not aware of some of the things that Tate has said and done, or they choose simply not to believe reports of what Tate has said and done. So unfortunately, it seems like Tate's approach of dismissing all this stuff as fabrication and a conspiracy against him appears to be working on some of his fans.
And do you think as well, this has also got something to do with, when we had the pandemic, people were a lot more online than seeing people in real life. Do you think that might have something to do with people's susceptibility to this misinformation and conspiracies?
I think the pandemic was definitely a big moment for misinformation in general. I mean, my organisation did lots and lots of work on vaccine and COVID misinformation. I mean, the basic facts of the situation, that everybody's, locked indoors for periods of time. Social media becomes pretty much the primary way you reach out to most of your family and friends. I think that has had a lasting effect on how people consume information, particularly children. So I think a lasting consequence of that is that in some ways people are more prepared to see someone like Andrew Tate rise. But I think it's really worth emphasising that this has been a relatively recent phenomena. This took place last year, when most pandemic measures have been lifted and people have returned to something resembling the normal life they had before. So, I really think a lot of this goes back to the design of TikTok. The way its algorithm works and the aggressiveness with which it will promote content which gets people to stay on platform, because that's what keeps users seeing adverts and earning them ad revenue. I think that's really the major culprit here.
You also did an experiment in August last year, looking at how social media algorithms are sort of promoting Tate's content. Could you also talk to me about that?
So the remarkable thing about this was we weren't intending to do an experiment that was looking at how TikTok was pushing Andrew Tate's content. But in the course of another piece of work we were doing about TikTok, we found that a brand new TikTok account that we had told TikTok belonged to a 13-year-old user was recommended Tate's content within 7 minutes of its existence. And in fact, I think it was in the first 15 minutes, it was recommended some of Tate's content twice. That gives you a sense of how aggressively TikTok's algorithm was promoting this content, because even with a brand new account with very little information about its preferences, It was already pushing Tate's content to see if that user was going to take an interest in it.
He was using the same marketing or the same messaging 4 years ago, but it's only been since TikTok that it's sort of blown up. Could you talk to me about that and explain that?
Yeah, I mean, an interesting experiment is to go back and just look at his websites over the last few years. He's been effectively selling the same sort of product for many, many years. A lot of what he had to offer was in line with those sort of pickup artists about how to form relationships with women, although uniquely with Tate, it was linked to his webcam business, which is part of this investigation now in Romania and sex trafficking and is sort of control and abuse of women. But it's been the same product all along, and along with lots of get-rich-quick schemes. It was this only last year when he hit upon this formula on TikTok, where he got his tightest group of supporters to go and set up brand new accounts and just repeatedly post clips of him saying controversial things that he took off. Now, that is partly because his content is engaging. The algorithm rewards content that is controversial and gets people to stop in their feeds and pay attention. And there's no question that, many of the most sort of disgusting things that Tate has said about women in particular will cause people to stop in their feeds. And the sort of image of lifestyle success that he has put together in many of these videos appears to have a particular appeal to young men who want to believe that there is some sort of quick route towards this image of, being draped in gold jewelry and having sports cars. So it's those two ingredients. He's gaming of the algorithm in terms of having an artificial network, and he's gaming of the algorithm in terms of choosing to design really sort of controversial content and put it up there. That's all come together and given him an explosive rise in popularity in the middle of last year.
What would you say are sort of like the key signs that your son or some young man that you know is being sort of dragged into sort of the Andrew Tate space, or like what's it referred to, the manosphere?
I mean, look, I think this is very difficult. I mean, I think, I've read some of the advice that has been sent out by schools and some of the reporting on this. I mean, I think the general advice is just to be open to having conversations with your children about the way that they use social media. Now, I grew up with very early internet social media. I was much more knowledgeable about what's going on online than my parents were. I think so. It's the same today, perhaps even to a greater extreme. But it's about being able to have conversations, open conversations, where you can try to understand what sort of diet of stuff that your kids are seeing online, and try to put it into context for them and get them to understand a little bit that, just because TikTok's showing it to you, it doesn't mean that TikTok's sort of giving it tacit approval, and that there can be things on there that, they've got millions of likes or millions of views. That's not a sign that it's, safe or fine or acceptable views by any sort of normal social standards. So I think that's the sort of important thing.